A while back, I covered Slovakia during the Second World War, and I mentioned that the Slovak army fought alongside the German and other Axis armies at the Eastern Front. Today, we're going to look at the Slovak Army of World War II and the Slovak Expeditionary Army Group on the Eastern Front. Keep watching. Good to have you back on the channel. If you're new, I'm Stefan, I'm a Dutch history teacher, make videos about history for you. If you find it interesting, well, consider subscribing and also hit that notification bell. After the First World War, an independent Czechoslovakia saw the light of day. Some Slovaks strived for more autonomy, and some were willing to go further and strive for an independent and separate Slovak nation. The main political force behind this was the Hlinka Slovak People's Party, which was led by Catholic priest Monsignor Andrej Hlinka. Hlinka passed away in 1938 and was succeeded by Josef Tiso. The Hlinka Party program was based on the social teachings of the Catholic Church combined with nationalism, anti-communism, authoritarianism, and democracy was rejected as an outdated concept. They believed that the current Czechoslovak Republic was just a transit station, a station which had to be followed by full independence, and that independence occurred in 1939. On the 14th of March 1939, the Slovaks proclaimed themselves as independent, and the following day, the remaining Czech lands were invaded by the German armies. Previously, Hitler had acquired a large part of the Czechoslovak borderlands known as the Sudetenland, and the remaining Czech lands that were now also part of the Third Reich, they were renamed to the Protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia. The new Slovak state was on paper a democratic republic, but in reality this was not the case since no elections ever took place. The Slovak army had around 30,000 men and took part in the invasion of Poland and annexed some of the territories, while the bulk of the nation was carved up by Germany and the USSR. The Slovak armed forces would grow to around 90,000 men. More than 40,000 Slovak soldiers would join Germany's attack on the USSR as the so-called Slovak Expeditionary Army Group. Initially, morale among the Slovak soldiers to invade the USSR was low. The USSR and the Slovaks had good relations, and also Hitler did not inform the Slovak nation in time about the upcoming invasion. And the reason for this was that Hitler deemed the Slovaks as unreliable and feared Slavic fraternization. Nevertheless, the Slovak leaders were aware of the amassing of German troops near the Soviet border, and the Slovak leaders, they offered the Germans to join the attack on the USSR. The Slovak Mobile Brigade had around 3,500 men and was immediately deployed. Equipped with light Czech tanks, the unit saw combat near Lipovets. However, the Soviet resistance proved to be too strong, and soon the Slovaks had to retreat. The Slovak tank losses were considerable. A German liaison officer complained to the authorities about the poor Slovak performances at the front, and another Slovak offer to join the attack was declined. Later, the Slovak soldiers were equipped with German gear, and they advanced with the German armies through southern Ukraine. Morale improved when they were welcomed by the Ukrainians as liberators. And when the Slovak soldiers witnessed the harsh reality of communism, think of dire poverty, destroyed churches, as well as prisons filled with countless corpses of executed political prisoners, they believed that they were here for a right cause. Under command of General Katloš, the Slovak Army Corps with 2 infantry divisions and corps troops moved through Ukraine. They were considered of little value by the Germans and needed to be reorganized. The bulk of the Slovak army then returned and 18,500 men stayed behind. They performed guard duties and fought Soviet partisans near Zhytomyr and later around Minsk. They carried out security tasks on the Sea of Azov. When the Soviet counterattacked on the Mias, the Slovaks were on the front line once again and took on a sector of 10 kilometers in December 1941. Led by Major General August Mahler, they managed to hold their positions till July 1942 and then advanced alongside the German 4th Panzer Army towards Rostov. Later, they crossed the Kuban region and helped capturing the region of Maikop. Casualties among the Slovaks were not necessarily because of combat, but more because of sickness and malnutrition. And the Germans, they had little sympathy for them. In August 1942, the division set up defensive positions near Tuapse because the drive on the Caucasus was halted. After the loss of Stalingrad, the Mobile Division hastily withdrew via the Sea of Azov along with the German armies. Using amphibious vehicles, they barely made it across the Strait of Kerch, leaving lorries and artillery behind. The reorganized 1st Slovak Infantry Division, with about 5,000 men, was evacuated to Crimea in March 1943. Morale was very poor. This was because of the losses, but also because they witnessed the German terror on the local Soviet population. And this was also because of the Hungarians. Previously, the Hungarians had taken territory from Slovakia. And since the Hungarians were on the same side as the Slovak leaders believed there was a little chance their lost territories would ever return from Hungary. On Crimea, one Slovak regiment remained there and another one took positions north at Kakova. There, a Soviet counteroffensive took place, and I read that the whole Slovak regiment was smashed and whole units deserted to the Red Army. It went from bad to worse. Desertion was a daily occurrence. A number of officers and numerous soldiers went to the other side and reported for duty in the 1st Czechoslovak Brigade of the Red Army. The same thing was happening at the same time in the Security Division around Minsk. Slovaks were deserting to the partisans by the hundreds. The Germans saw this as well, and the Slovaks were pulled off the front line. They were now used as a labor division in Italy. Other Slovak units were put to work in Romania and later Hungary. The Slovak army continued to wear Czechoslovak uniforms, albeit with new insignia. The soldiers had green-brown uniforms, and the rank-and-file soldier wore low ankle boots and puttees. On this photograph, you see Slovak soldiers at the Polish front during the Polish campaign of 1939. They wear armbands with swastikas. This is very interesting, as the Hlinka party had another symbol, not the swastika. I think this was because of the fact that the Slovak uniforms had somewhat of the same color as the Polish uniforms. Therefore, the Slovak troops ran the risk of being seen as Polish enemy soldiers by the Germans, but the swastikas would prevent this. The helmets had also a distinguished feature to prevent friendly fire. The Slovak helmet was a Czechoslovakian VZ-32 reissued for the Slovak army. These reissued helmets had a blue band painted at the base of the helmet. This is most likely to distinguish them from the Soviet forces. A double white cross was stenciled to the side of the helmets, sometimes on both sides. The soldiers of the Slovak army continued to carry the VZ-24 rifle, a bolt-action carbine designed and produced in Czechoslovakia from 1924 onwards. It was developed from the German Mausergewehr 98 and had a similar bolt design. It replaced the VZ-98-22 rifle, which was also based on the German model. From the spring of 1944, it became clear that the Slovak nation would not survive this war. Around that time, partisans were dropped by the Soviet Air Force, who committed acts of sabotage, and the Slovak police force was hopelessly under-equipped and undermanned to prevent this. Martial law was declared mid-August, but in reality this only existed on paper. Towards the end of the month, German forces entered the country and the Slovak army revolted. Around 60,000 Slovak insurgent forces were able to stop Germans for 2 months. Towards the end of October, the Germans had suppressed the uprising and occupied the whole nation. It led to murderous consequences. Villages suspected of collaboration with the insurgent army, that was by now called the Czechoslovak Army in Slovakia, were destroyed and many people were executed. Eventually, the Red Army took over Bratislava early April 1945. With that, the Slovak Republic ceased to exist. After the war, Josef Tiso, among other high-ranking persons of the former Slovak state, were tried and executed. If you want to have the full story of Slovakia during the Second World War, you can click right here. And if you like to learn about another pro-Axis nation that also joined the fight on the Eastern Front, you can click right here for the video about the Royal Hungarian Army. If you want to support me, go to my Patreon page. Do not forget to subscribe, and I'll see you later.